Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Quarter Brain Cell podcast. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Everybody, I'm Matt. I'm the Chief Science Officer for the New York Coalition to Save the SS United States. I've been doing this for a while now, I guess. Jack of all trades. Most of my background is in environmental remediation, but there's a lot of things I've done. Some of you may know that I'm a Revolutionary War reenactor, for example. But it's an honor to be here tonight, and I'm looking forward to talking about the Coalition, the ship, and some other things, too.
Great. Awesome. So, we'll start off, Matt. Just a brief summarize, because I've gone over this before myself. Would you like to tell our viewers exactly what is going on with the SS United States right now?
Okay, so as of Friday, we have filed our amended complaint against Okaloosa County, which has been beefed up with to respond to some points that they had in their original motion to dismiss. Now, the motion to dismiss does not mean the end of the case, of course. It means that we are entitled to file a response, which is what we've done. We've added in some additional information. We've built up our core case in terms of legal standing and some other concerns. And we've also added in a lot of environmental concerns. There were some issues that have been talked about in the past about things like the zinc chromate primer on the superstructure of the ship, the presence of aluminum in seawater, other contaminants that may be left in place, like polychlorinated biphenyls, which are a common rubberizer that were used back in the 1950s through the 60s. So we've really come back swinging pretty hard. I'm not sure what our expected response date from Okaloosa will be, but I mean, it's only Monday after all, so they probably are just about seeing it today, and I'm sure they'll have some interesting points to raise, but we'll see where it goes. As of right now, we also are still waiting to hear back in our response from the White House. We've petitioned the White House yet again. Our petition has now collected over 13,000 signatures, which is an incredible milestone. We're hoping to get to 15,000 as soon as possible. That actually puts us very, very far in the lead out of all petitions that have been created around trying to save the SS United States. It's something we're very proud of, and a sincere thank you to everyone who's shared and participated, discussed, and raised awareness about the cause. It's really been incredible to see the outpour of support. I remember when we were starting out and we were at like 40 to 50 signatures, and it's amazing how far it's come in that short amount of time. I think it's only been just about 2 months. So thank you for that. Aside from that, we are planning some future events coming up. We're going to be doing a live stream around June 23rd to celebrate the launch of the ship. There's some more details that are being fleshed out as we have our general meetings in the coalition. Looking forward to talking more about that as we get more information together, because it takes time to put these things together, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. So that's it's been a little bit of a lull period over the last couple weeks. We definitely had our very busy high water mark in terms of activity around March when the ship was coming into Mobile and we were first starting all this. But that doesn't mean the fight stopped. It just means that it's gone a little bit of a lull, and it'll come back around within the next few weeks, I'm sure. But we're not giving up till the end.
We ain't giving up until that ship is at the bottom. Or in Brooklyn.
The bottom of Brooklyn. The
bottom or Brooklyn. That's going to be another one. Bottom or Brooklyn.
Yeah. It's been a lot of hard work, though. It's very much been a lot of things moving behind the scenes. I mean, the court system only moves so fast. Writing these complaints and filing them takes a lot of work. Our attorney's done an amazing job with that. Our whole legal team really has just been absolute rock stars in getting this out there. Some of the things we've been working on in addition to that, we are planning some, again, like I said, future events, talking about crystallization steps with the plans to redevelop the property. It's all coming together slowly but surely, and the moment there's more public things to show, I'm more than happy to broadcast them live, and the coalition themselves is more than happy to broadcast them live. But that's the thing; these things take time, and that's the unfortunate downside in a lot of ways of like being someone on the sidelines, because I'm seeing this every day, and I can't really take myself out and see like what have people seen recently, what have people been talking about recently.
Yeah.
So it's a bit it's always good to talk to people and listen and see like what they're what they're interested in, what they want to hear more about, and like what we can talk more about. But that's the state of things right now.
Great. Okay. So you said you were the chief science officer. Is that right?
Yes, because I have a background in environmental remediation, so a lot of my interests and concerns in the coalition revolve around both, broadcasting concerns about the environmental impact of reefing a ship, and also the lesser concerns of redeveloping the ship into a safe and clean property down the line. So you kind of think that they're not necessarily that related to each other, or that all of the concerns that would apply to reefing would apply to redeveloping the property, and that's not really the case. Uh, the analogy that I always use is that reefing a ship or sinking anything that large in the ocean is like putting a tea bag in a mug of hot water. Everything that will leach out will, given enough time. Especially things like PCBs. The Oriskany, when the Oriskany was reefed, there was about 700 pounds of PCBs that were left on board. And those started showing up in the environment. They started showing up in the wildlife. And it got bad enough that if it wasn't for the Deepwater Horizon spill, uh, Florida Fish and Wildlife would have had to have issued a swimming restriction and fishing restriction around the wreck. But of course,
Mm.
the Deepwater Horizon overshadowed much of that time. So everything will eventually find its way back out again.
Right.
But on land or above water, you don't really have as much of a concern because you can seal off areas that are particularly contaminated, and they won't, get into the air and aerosolize and become a problem down the line. We actually call that engineering controls in the environmental world, and because of that ability, it makes it a lot easier to redevelop the ship into commercial use because of that ability. Which really is something that reefs can't do. A reef ship has to be very, very clean in order to not become a problem down the line. But the SS United States, even as she is now, with some modifications, would be more than acceptable to be in for an extended period of time, and have people visiting, staying a long period of time, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's kind of like one of the environmentally significant points is that the ship is much healthier above water than she is underwater for everybody involved.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even in my brief research on the topics, yeah, it seems that's my general consensus as well.
Yeah, yeah, and accessibility too. Obviously, just visiting a ship in a dock is a lot easier than diving on a ship about 150 feet down or more.
Yeah.
Uh, So it's I think also kind of another important factor too when it comes to the idea of preservation. Some people have said, well, is reefing the ship a kind of preservation? And it's a lot more challenging to get to. There are
Yeah.
people that have medical issues. There are people that can't walk. There are people that just are afraid of diving, which I totally understand. Uh, and having the ship above water in Brooklyn would be the best way to continue her legacy forward, and keep her around as a shining example of engineering and prowess, and allowing many, many, many more people to be inspired by her in the same way that the Queen Mary continues to be an inspiration over on the West Coast. Uh, we're very blessed that we have a lot of help from the QMI and a lot of support from them, direct support even, and that's been an absolute game changer in our ability to like visualize what we want to do with the ship and what we want to do with the GVX property, and what we want to learn from those lessons that were learned 50 odd years ago, uh, and how you better preserve a ship in the 21st century. And I think that's kind of like a really important thing, is that she's a blank slate right now. I've been on board, which is a fantastic experience. I was very lucky to do it back in September before she left Philadelphia, and she really is a blank slate. A lot, she almost looks like a warehouse on the inside. And there's so much that could be done with those spaces. There's so much that could be done with that volume while preserving the historicity of the ship, and making her accessible and useful through the 21st century and beyond.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I haven't actually had the pleasure of being on board, but I have. I've seen like videos on YouTube of people who have, and yeah, it's like a completely blank slate. It's very, very empty. What year was it that she was? gutted in Sevastopol, I believe it was, in Ukraine. It was
I believe it was 1996.
96, right?
Yeah, and to my understanding and recollection now, I might get this wrong, so don't quote me on this, because I'm not looking this up right now. I got a mechanical keyboard. You don't want to hear that thing clacking. Uh, um, but I believe it was correlated with possible plans for reactivation that were being studied by Carnival Cruise Lines around the same time. I believe that those plans are roughly contemporaneous to that decision.
I
And,
do
they had to pull out
recall
the
that, yeah.
asbestos and everything else. I saw a copy of the reactivation proposal from the 90s that came up on eBay. And I tell you what, we almost damn near bought the thing for the coalition, but at the last second, we got sniped and went over $700 for
Oh,
the whole
jeez.
thing. We were so close. I like, I was at work as I was working that weekend. I like my finger was on the buy button, and I just hit it like a second too late. And I was like,
Oh, that's
lesson learned there.
unfortunate. Yeah, that's eBay for you. I had a very similar experience with my cup and saucer I got from the ship. Just a bidding war. At the last like 5 minutes, it was just me and one other person going back and forth, and they kept trying to up me by like $1 or $2. So I said,
I got very lucky.
I'm just gonna up my bid. Just
I also got a cup and saucer too. I got very lucky. It was like right before the big SS United States hype started taking off on like memorabilia, and I was like, I want a mug. So I have the cup and saucer, and I have like 4 or 5 SS United States artifacts. I got a cup and saucer, I got a water glass from the cabins, and I got an old fashioned glass.
ooh, right.
My fine china, as it were. But they all came off the ship in the 1980s auction, and it's amazing that they're 60 odd years old, still hold up great. Even crystals, great.
That's what I'm always keeping my my eye on eBay, just keeping my eye out for stuff. I know it's probably going to be price gouging at the moment because of all the hype going on about it, but
there's a lot of interest, of course. But
I don't even want to ask what you paid for your cup, and I don't even want to say what I paid for mine because I guarantee you, I got gouged, but I really wanted it. So
me too. I was like, you know what, I'd pay almost any price for this. But yeah, it sits in my collection now, and I do occasionally use it. I'm sure I've given myself a little bit of lead poisoning from it, but I'm young, I can handle it.
I've actually looked it up. Since it's glazed, any paint that's on it is it's pretty much free to safe to drink out of. I did a little bit of research on them, and since it's glazed pottery more so, it's pretty safe.
Yeah, I think it's true with even lead crystal too. Is like it's only really a problem if you have alcohol in a decanter that you let sit for like weeks or months on end. Maybe you'll get elevated lead, but it's pretty inert.
Yeah, it's pretty.
At least what I tell myself, at least.
We've got, I mean, 21st century human beings. We've got a whole bunch of stuff floating around in their bodies anyway. So what's a little bit of lead,
Yeah, it's just old fashioned. I'd be more worried about the microplastics, and even that, is what it is.
It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it anyway. So, where were we? I had gone into a little bit about the zinc chromate and such, but given you are much more intelligent in the field than I am, would you like to talk about that?
Absolutely. So, zinc chromate, it started getting use in the 1930s as an aircraft primer because it bonds very well to aluminum and you can paint right over it. If you ever looked at color photographs of World War II bomber factories in the U.S., you'll see that all the planes, before they get finished, are painted this like yellowish green color, and that's zinc chromate. So it's very useful in that front. It's pretty good at bonding to aluminum, pretty good at bonding to paint. It primes very well. Problem is, it's very toxic. Of course. And so when the SS United States was built in 1951, my apologies, the best analog they had for painting that large of an aluminum superstructure were airplanes. So they used zinc chromate primer. So if you look at a lot of the footage on board the SS United States that's been filmed, pictures have been taken, everything on the inside of the superstructure is yellow because it's zinc chromate. And we actually stopped using it sometime, I want to say in about the middle of the century, like 1970s, 1980s, towards that range, because of how bad it was. And even today, modern aircraft restorers that are working on vintage aircraft, they don't tend to use zinc chromate primer. They use some other material that I'm not familiar with, but it's about the same. It's like a slightly darker shade of the same kind of color, and you can usually tell when it's been done because it's a slightly darker green versus that lighter yellow green of zinc chromate. Either way, it's chromate on the whole is a really, really gnarly contaminant. It's one of the reasons why we kind of stopped using it in cars, is because chromed cars, chromate, same related substance. It gets into the groundwater. It's relatively stable, and it's just very toxic. I'd love to pull up the safety data sheets on it, but it's really unpleasant. It stays in soil for a very long time. When I was doing remediation work back in the day, you'd find like old metal factories that had big old chromate plumes beneath them, and it's very hard to clean up because you can't really break it down biotically. It accumulates in life. It's really just very, very gnarly stuff. And so the SS United States is kind of unique because she's a very large potential source. Even if they remove part of the superstructure, as I hear they've planned to do, there's still quite a bit of that material that's being left in situ, and that will leach out over time. Again, underwater, things will leach out. And it's going to start showing up in the fish populations. It's going to start showing up, hopefully, God willing, not in people, but that's something down the chain. So it's not really something you want to be exposed to. Of all the things that I've worked with in remediation, definitely zinc chromate was one of the ones, or chromates in general, were ones that I really didn't like finding in soil. That and benzene. Benzene's also pretty nasty, but that's like an oil byproduct, so a bit of a lesser concern. But either way, it's kind of something that people haven't really talked about much because it's a very unique application in a very specific context. Modern shipbuilding wouldn't use that, and the only other analogs that exist out there, the closest real analog is the Andrea Doria, which was built in the same way with an aluminum superstructure and steel hull. I don't know for sure if the Andrea Doria used zinc chromate on her superstructure because she was built in Italy and they might have had different standards back then. But it's a point of concern. It's a genuine point of concern, and it's not really something that was either surveyed when the ship was prepped for reactivation. Because I talked about how terrible it is, but if you leave it in place, it's like asbestos. You leave it in place, it's not really a problem. But if you expose it and you soak it in salt water, then it starts breaking down, and then it starts becoming a problem. And I talked about engineering controls. The easiest solution there is to paint the wall, but that too will break down in seawater given enough time. So it's something that I haven't really seen many news articles talking about. I've seen a couple mentions of the PCBs situation, but the zinc chromate one also seems to be just as pressing and just as novel a concern. Because again, there's really no other ship that would have that much on board. And the only ones that we're really aware of are ships that sank 60 years ago. So it's kind of hard to track like what the dispersion of the environment was over time. Because, people didn't really start thinking like this until about the 1970s in general. There's no real like long survey history of sea life around the Andrea Doria. There's no real survey history of, other ships that may have zinc chromate on board, or even like aircraft wrecks, because they're tiny, comparatively, especially so. So it's definitely something that is unexplored and unspoken. It's something that I think is very much worth the attention from anyone remotely interested in it. It should be a major red flag for the prospect of reefing the ship. Either remove all of it entirely, which presents a whole other host of issues, or just don't do it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because you could strip out all the primer, right, which is fine enough, but then you have bare aluminum. You have bare aluminum and steel. And then you have a big galvanic cell, because that's what happened with the Andrea Doria, actually, is the superstructure, which was aluminum, started breaking down rapidly, and the hull was protected by it because the electronegativity properties of the two metals in contact. So then you're talking about accelerating galvanic corrosion on the ship, which is not great for divers and probably not great for sea life, but I'm not really aware of any large-scale studies on galvanic corrosion and sea life. It never really has been a cause for such a thing in the grand scheme of things. This is kind of broaching new and uncertain territory, and the consequences of it could be very dire because we just don't have an understanding of it. And it's, I can't legally say like, oh, it's going to definitely be a disaster, but there's a lot of potential for things to go wrong. There's a lot of questions that I think should be asked, and people in Okaloosa and surrounding waters should be asking the same thing themselves. Are they going to be exposed to something because of this? There are no really good analogs. We don't know. We really
Right.
don't know. And it's probably better that this get resolved proactively versus using the SS United States as a famous case study in environmental books 20, 30 years from now. I think that'd be the best outcome for everybody involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of unknowns. You can make arguments about like just remove all the PCBs, just remove all the zinc chromate. But that presents new issues. I mean, they wanted to remove all the PCBs on the Oriskany, but they couldn't because it would have involved tearing up the flight deck, and it just was cost prohibitive at that point. Yeah, that's true of a lot of things in life. Really, is that anything's possible with enough time and money. And there comes a point where you have to make the call on one or both of those, and even that comes to even with remediation in a professional setting, that also kind of becomes a question. From a New Jersey state perspective, we use something called monitored natural attenuation, or MNA, which is where if the conditions are right, you can sample a site and then say, well, the numbers are going down, we're doing good, and then you just come back every 2 years and you repeat the process over and over again. Because you could absolutely get a brownfield site down to absolutely sterile if you were willing to spend like $100 million on it.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to put a building on there. You got to put a property on there. Like, you got to make it safe enough for people that are going to move on to that site to, live there. And you can do that. Absolutely. That's the whole balance of environmental remediation is, figuring out the best way to do something and figuring out the most precise way to do something versus just trying to go at it and make something a clean slate, which again is something that reefing a ship is definitely an unprecedented unprecedented thing. It's not something that's done extremely often and extremely repeatably. Like, it does happen a lot, but every ship's different. Every ship comes from a different background. Every ship has a different level of contamination present. It's much more variable. And even now, the EPA still looks at assessing these things on a case-by-case basis, which, that also takes time, money, and effort. Generally speaking, the more individual government representatives you have working on a project, the more expensive the project becomes, especially from a federal context. And that's kind of, I guess, that kind of dovetails into like some of the additional points that we've made in our amended complaint, which is, the ship exists at an interesting intersection, unlike a lot of other historic ships, because she's on the National Register of Historic Places and has been since 1999. So because of that, any time that federal funding, federal permitting, federal approval, federal anything comes into play, that automatically triggers a National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 review, where a review has to be held to figure out what the impacts of this act are and what the consequences of doing it will be to the affected historic place. It doesn't stop you, for example, taking your National Registered house and tearing it down and putting a 5/1 on it, but it at least raises questions and opens the floor to debate about, like, is this the most viable alternative? Like, do other alternatives exist? Is this overly destructive? It allows those questions to be asked and discussed. And as far as we know, that's not something that's happened yet with the SS United States. And legally, because there are federally controlled materials on board, that act should be triggered, and there should be a Section 106 hearing on it sooner rather than later, because obviously you don't want to be in a position where everything's all said and done, and it's like, oh wait, no, we can't actually reef the ship now. Sorry about that, and she's sitting in Mobile with no funnels and most of her superstructure gone. Not exactly a showstopper, mind you, for the whole idea of rebuilding the ship at GBX. Just really expensive.
Yeah.
We have a fair level of lateral, tolerance on like what might need to be replaced, what might need to be repaired. There's work that would have to be done anyway because the ship, we couldn't just open the doors and say, okay, you're good to come on board and do whatever you want. There's things that have to be replaced, like the windows.
Yeah, the promenade windows.
Yeah, exactly. Those have already come off. Which is, it's unfortunate in a sense because you are losing a bit of history, but it would have been a necessary evil anyway for the kind of work that we want to do.
Yeah.
realistically speaking, those windows haven't been serviced since the 1970s, and we have much better energy ratings in glass and gaskets. So they need to go. We need to put new windows in anyway if we want to maintain a good heating and cooling bill on the ship.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's kind of like something you have to kind of balance with protection of an artifact like this. Is that you will have to make some compromises and some changes. The Queen Mary had some of her windows enlarged and changed when she was put into service as a hotel ship because there was an interest in doing that, and also they wanted to replace the windows that had been battered by the Atlantic for 30 odd years.
Right.
So you make those little compromises, you make those little tweaks, and we learn from the lessons of the past, and we know how to take care of historical ships better now. So it can be a lot more of a focused and structured remediation, but some little tiny changes like that might have to come about. But as it stands right now, I really want to drive home the point to everyone listening. We're not in a situation where things are irreversible. Even if the funnels come off, it's not an irreversible situation. We absolutely feel that we have recourse for this. We absolutely feel that we can, once this is in front of the right set of eyes, and we all know which set of eyes it has to be, that this can be resolved very quickly. It's just a matter of, staying the course, continuing our efforts, making sure that all of our due diligence is done, and go from there.
Right. That's one thing. You brought up a good point. There's a lot of stuff that could come off theoretically, and it not really be a big deal in the long run.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned the funnels, because the Queen Mary had her funnels completely torn off and replaced with replicas. Am I right?
Yes.
That's a prime example.
Yeah, and they're actually even built differently than the original funnels, because the original funnels were supported by the cabling on the outside.
Yeah.
But the Queen Mary's new funnels are actually internally braced, which they couldn't do when she was in service, of course. And the guy wires are more or less decoration. So they're built much more robustly. At the time when she came into museum ships or hotel ship service, they were so rotted out that basically parts of the bottoms of the funnels were being held together by the paint.
Right.
Obviously, the funnels on the SS United States are in much better shape. They're aluminum, so they're a little more robust. And, I've seen them up close, and they look pretty darn good. The paint's peeling, but they're structurally sound. So, we probably wouldn't have to replace them, but, if they come off, then we just got to put them back on again or build replicas. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And, that does make some things easier, too. If you have to do work in the engine rooms, if we're talking about the idea of preserving and restoring the engines or something like that, then we'd have to get down in there anyway, and that's what she was built to do. Take the funnels off, take the engines out. So that's also, all part of that process too. So, her coming to GBX would definitely be a rebirth process, and there might be some changes made in that aspect, but everything that we'd be doing would be in the mindset of we want the ship to last for the next 75 years.
Yeah.
And, keep her alive and vibrant and as close to the day that she was laid up in 1969 as possible. Basically, it's kind of like the mindset that we have going into it.
Right. One point there's a lot of people that have been talking about is she's rusted out. She's there's a big old hunk of rusting metal. Personally, I know that is not the case. I work with steel and aluminum and paints and such on a daily basis. But what is your view on that talking point?
She's got a lot of peeling paint, but
Cosmetic.
She's very she's very structurally sound. There's never a point when I was on the ship and I thought I'm gonna fall through. As far as I can recall, she still retains somewhere between 90 and 95% of her original hull integrity, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing you have to really bear in mind is that she was built for a 30 to 40 year service on the Atlantic. She should have lasted as long as Queen Elizabeth II, basically, and she only really saw 15 years of that. Relatively low intensity transits between across the Atlantic, and only a third of her service life maybe. And then she was laid up, and taken care of very well for 15 years after that. And then she was taken care of decently well for after that. She was obviously actually maintained until she was off the out of the Navy's requisition list.
Yeah.
but she was extremely well cared for, and you even see that, you know, when you're on board today, and I should say back in September, there's still a lot of like the structural integrity is still there. She needs a good cleaning, which I'm certain she's getting right now. But aside from that, you know, everything's sound, everything's robust, everything's, you know, maybe there was a window or two that was missing some glass, but you know, overall in very, very, very good shape, structurally and internally. So really, she needs a nice coat of paint someday. Uh, but aside from that, you know, you put a fresh coat of paint on her, and she'd look almost as good as she did the day she was laid up.
Minus the back railing.
Oh yeah, minus the back. Yeah, I think they took that off during some of the remediation work that they're doing down in Mobile. But
yeah, I do recall seeing that removed and replaced with like construction fencing, I think, or something along the lines of that, just like a rope.
Yeah, which is fair. I mean, I think could have been a hazard. In a sense, it kind of was. I mean, I wasn't allowed to get anywhere near it when I was on board.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But again, those if I recall, those railings around the decks were kind of intended to be removed at the same time as well. Am I correct?
Yeah, they were you know, replaceable at least.
Yeah.
But you know, for accessing stuff and storage and things like that, yeah. One fun little tidbit that I did learn when I was on board is that one of her propellers is on her stern, of course. And it's right next to this flat metal disc, right next to it. The discs were originally cut and shaped to be sized to carry the props, but they were made too small, so they put the propellers next to it. This is all the way back in the 90s, of course. But
I didn't know about that one. That's new information to me.
Yeah, that was pretty funny when I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, look at that. It's the wrong size. You know, it's about like half a foot too small. But yeah, I mean, like I said, coming back to her structural integrity, I mean, she was cared for very well, and as best as anyone could. And her being overbuilt so well, you know, from the context of being a troop ship, from the context of being an Atlantic liner, she could afford to sit for that long and still maintain a lot of her hull integrity. I mean, I know a lot of the reactive, you know, we're probably way beyond the point of any reactivation proposal discussions, but that was probably the least irrational thing about any of them, is that she has the integrity for it, she has the structure for it.
Yeah.
It would just have been a matter of spending a fair amount of money bringing her back into service, because you know, I those engines are antiques.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if they could ever run again in this state, but you know, it's very much, you know, looks are deceiving.
Oh yeah,
she's
definitely
a lot better physically than she is to the eyes. Well, I think she's still beautiful, but you know.
Oh yeah, she's got her own. There's a certain charm to her, definitely.
She's a fine ship. She really is.
Oh yeah.
You know, every time I look at her, she always grows on me a little bit. I
remember
when I was I used to do some work down in Baltimore, so I had to take I-95 back home once, and I'd go right through Philadelphia. And I remember I was coming down the road, and I was, wait a second, I should be in the SS United States, and I like craned my head in the company work truck, you know, driving this silly little Nissan work truck, and I no, it was a Ram actually, and I look over and I see the back of her funnels. I'm like, there she is, and then I had to, you know, keep going. But I was like, that was the first time I ever saw her in person. I was so excited about that. It was like a 3.5 hour drive, but I was like, I got back to the office and I was just beaming, because I was like, I finally saw the SS United States. You know, it's funny, you know, never in 1,000 years do you think yourself in the position of like, oh wow, I'm actually involved in this effort to save this ship, and here I am working with these luminaries of people around me pursuing the same goal. It's like, how did that happen? It was my remediation background that actually got me into it, because around the time the sale happened, I was as morose as anybody about it. I was like, wow, this really sucks. God, I wish there's something I could do about it. And, you know, I've had some of my silly ideas in my back pocket about like what could be done with the SS United States. That's not me. That's not, you know, the coalition talking. That's me talking, to be clear. But I saw an article in the Gothamist, and it mentioned Dan McSweeney and John Quadrosi, and I was like, I should get in touch with these guys. So I dug through. I found Dan's email, and I had a like hour and a half phone call with him, and then he was like, yeah, come to the next meeting. And I went to the next meeting, and you know, one thing led to another, and here I am as a full-fledged member. So I think it's kind of like, if you really take any lesson home from the you know, doing this kind of stuff. It's that the barrier to entry on getting involved in something like this is a lot lower than you think it is. You put up a higher wall in your head. And 99% of the time, maybe even a little more than that, people are willing to talk about the things that they're passionately involved in, the things they're passionately supporting. And if you bring ideas and energy and strategy to the table, it makes you a very valuable person to have. And I think that's something that, the coalition definitely done a lot of outreach and getting people involved. I know there's some really great people over in the Ocean Liner Designs Discord
Oh yeah.
uh, that have, gotten involved in this and have put in hours worth of work. I mean, I look at some of these guys and I'm like, wow, I'm doing nothing, aren't I? People calling their Congress critters, calling their representatives, put in all this legwork and groundwork and talking to people. And it's like, wow, it really is remarkable seeing people come together on a common cause like this. For as easy it is to be cynical about people in numbers, sometimes you really strike gold with the right motivations and the right ideas.
Yeah.
And you just get the right people coming together and saying, I want to be a part of this too, and I want to help however I can. And I really think that's been the most the thing that really keeps us going collectively, is that seeing all the people coming out and supporting us and saying, like, we believe in this too, and we believe reefing's the wrong choice and there's a better alternative for this. It's remarkable. It really is. There's a lot of loud people out there that are like, oh, you should reef the ship. Oh, we're those anti-reefers, they don't know what they're talking about. But it's really not that many people. They're just loud.
Yeah.
There's so many more people. Again, over 13,000 people have signed the petition. And I've gotten hundreds of messages over, the weeks and months talking about this. People asking how they can help, or like who they can talk to, or what they can do. And I'm sorry for any of you that I haven't gotten back to yet. There's I work a day job, unfortunately, in addition to this. But that support really means a lot, and it really is. You put your faith in the common person for once on something like this, about like a lot of people working together and a really great team at the helm, which is what the coalition is. It really, really just, it's amazing to see. If we're successful or not, failure is always a possibility. I fully express that. I believe that from the day that I, even got interested in this. But, succeed or fail, there's something incredible that's happened here. And maybe it won't be the SS United States that gets rescued, but it's some other ship down the line, or some other historical ships down the line. And that's a point that I've really tried to drive home a lot, is that, it's not just about this ship, it's about what it represents. We've treated a lot of our historic vessels as kind of disposable, and the ones that we don't treat as disposable, they're always, warships. And not there's anything wrong with warships. I know they're very cool. I personally think the Iowa class is awesome. But how often have we preserved a real ship of peace?
Exactly.
And unity, and what we can do when we're not, obviously, yeah, she was built as a troop ship, but what we can create when we're not fighting war, and we're creating something that represents us as a collective. You don't really see a lot of those. There's only really a handful of ocean liners that have survived into the 21st century, and most of them are endangered.
Mhm.
Some of them are preserved, thankfully. But it's like, well, we might have this question, in 20 or 30 years when the Queen Mary II is getting retired. I don't think the debate at that point should be, what do we do with this ship? It's like, where do we put this ship? Does she go to Southampton? Does she go to London? Does she go to, somewhere else? That, I think, is how we need to start reframing historical preservation, writ large, too. Again, I'm a Revolutionary War reenactor, so I'm no stranger to 250 years of real estate development messing with battlefields and stuff like that. And a lot of times they come up and they're endangered because people want to redevelop them. People want to, don't see the value of preserving these historic spaces, because it's not just about having land; it's about the stories that they tell. You look at places like Brandywine, Monmouth, Lexington and Concord, which just passed, Bunker Hill. These are incredibly important stories in the mythos that we teach ourselves, and they're so much more valuable than just being a plot of land to be redeveloped. They're part of that story, and I feel very lucky to be part of literally the oldest Revolutionary War reenacting group in the United States. and being able to tell that story in a lot of ways. It's not just about, the 250 coming up. It's not just about going out there and doing these things. It's also about our own history as reenactors, because we've been around since 1966. So some of that story is there too. And it's inspiring people to learn about these things, to understand what happened back then. In the same way that we have our monuments and we have our battlefields and we have our battleships, maybe we too should have our ships too. These are a dying breed. These are a rare species of what we can create at our finest. And they are remarkable, and they should be preserved as remarkable pieces of that history. Because it's not just about, the here and now, like trying to save this ship that's very much in danger. It's about who might be inspired by it 20 years from now. Another great generation of marine architects might come out by having the ship saved in Gowanus Bay and being able to visit her and see her and understand her and have something capture their imagination. The same way the story of the Titanic seems to recapture our imaginations every 20 years or so. It gets people thinking about things. It gets people telling that story and serving as a monument to what we can do at our most creative and the big things that we can pull off. It makes impossible dreams seem a little bit more real. Not just about, creating ships or creating buildings. It's about the big things. Like, how do you solve the problems of society? How do you solve the problems of, those kind of ills? They're just as impossible to deal with as building the largest ocean liner in the world. But those things, being able to actually see something that tangible and something that vast and incomprehensible, it makes everything else seem a little bit more real. And I think that's the importance of monuments, of our maritime heritage, and just preserving history on the whole. Because there are people that were faced with impossible challenges. Building a ship the size of the SS United States just hadn't happened until she was built. And overcoming those challenges, overcoming the engineering technical challenges, the bureaucratic challenges, the financial challenges, those are lessons that we can take forward to even the most esoteric of causes that we want to put ourselves behind. And that's why I think that, much like, aqueducts or the Colosseum or the monuments of old, the pyramids even, there's something about it that becomes inspiring, and it transcends the idea of it just being a monument to pharaohs or those long dead. It kind of becomes a symbol of something much bigger. And I think the human spirit is always achieving the impossible and always shooting for these incredible challenges. I'm a big space buff as well. So one of my favorite things, a couple years ago, almost 10 years ago now, I was down at Kennedy Space Center, got to see the Saturn V that they have on display down there. And it really just drives home. This was an impossible challenge that people rose up to do. And they made it happen on computers with less processing power than the average calculator. It's a monument to what can be done. And I think that's such an important thing to carry forward. It's such an important cause that transcends just saving the SS United States. Because it's not just about the SS United States at the end. It's about all of these things. It's about all these things that we can actually do something about and save and preserve to carry forward. So I think it's like the single most important thing is that artifacts can live a lot longer than people. I can go stand at the Lexington Green, long after any of the people that participated in that event have passed on. I can see the Queen Mary too, and I'm certain almost everybody who's worked on her has now since passed on, but she's still with us. Artifacts and monuments carry stories through time. It's not just about the scale of things, but it's about the longevity of things. And it's why I'm involved in this, really. It's why I've got involved in the coalition. It's why I believe so much in our cause. Not only do I believe it to be possible, but I believe that even the very act of accomplishing this and saving the ship from destruction and ensuring her historical preservation is just as much of a moonshot and just as much of a grand idea that I just love. Because that's a very human element.
I don't think I could have said it better myself. Good Lord.
I have my moments.
It's like poetry.
But yeah, it's It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah,
But
George Lucas.
that's great guy. Yeah, that's what I think is like important. Is that it's part of the storytelling, and if we're successful, then it'll be one of the most amazing miracles that any group of people has ever pulled off. And if we're unsuccessful, 50 years from now, people will be saying, "Why didn't they save that ship? Why didn't they do that?" And they'll look and they'll say, "Oh, the coalition did. They tried. They fought
Yeah.
hard. They fought very hard, and they came up short because XYZ reasons or something else went wrong." And I don't want to be remembered in history books, of course, which is kind of an irony given that I've now attached myself to such a prominent event. But it'd be nice to be remembered as some of the people who stood up and did the right thing in a time when it wasn't quite so clear. Because I think 50 years from now, it'll be very cut and dry. It's like, wow, they should have saved the ship.
Yep.
Like scrapping the Olympic. People looked back even in the 50s and said, yeah, we made the choice to bring jobs to Jarrow to, help stimulate the economy, but why didn't we try to save such an important ship? It'll be that same context,
Yep.
25, 30, 50 years from now, that same realization of like, it'll be so obvious and people will think, why did they ever think otherwise? But in the moment, it's a lot murkier, and in the moment, it's a lot blurrier and uncertain. There's, voices on all sides saying, we got to reef the ship, save the environment. Well, I don't know if it'll really save the environment, to tell you the truth. I think there's a lot of potential for environmental damage and hazard here. It's ships are cheap, but they're not great reef substrates, and they're contamination point sources. There's a lot that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe in the benefit of hindsight, it'll be, wow, that was a really bad idea. And can we undo something like that? 25 years from now, can we raise the SS United States off the seabed? It'd be a hell of an adventure, but
Yeah.
I'd rather save the ship while she's still afloat.
Yeah. I think that's a much rather play it safe, don't learn the hard way.
Yes. Because we can learn from, past experiences and say, oh, we can do XYZ and we can, do things right. Like we don't have the benefit of not knowing at this point. We have better understandings and better arguments, and that's why the whole environmental movement, the whole idea of an environmental movement, sprung out of Silent Spring in the 1960s, I believe, but really the founding of the EPA, Earth Day, which is coming up tomorrow. All of these other things that only really came about within the last 50 years. It's a relatively new angle to explore the world in. And I want to be clear, I am very much not like, don't think that I'm a tree hugger or like, really into those sort of things, because I'm just a regular guy. But that new perspective is very important to have. It's the thing that most people cut corners on because they still live in that pre-1970s mindset of, it's not a huge deal, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we've worked so hard to both preserve what we already have and restore that which has been damaged. And our understanding of the environment will only continue to get better with time, and our ability to fix our past mistakes will only get better. We'll only keep learning lessons. No matter how much it seems like things have gone backwards or whatever, we will always continue to learn lessons and always continue to build on our better understanding of the world that we live in. And protecting the environment by not reefing the ship, I think, is a pretty good thing. I think it's something that is a lot more cut and dry than people like to admit. And that is challenging. That flies in the face of like, well, isn't it good to have a reef? Well, the benefits of reefing a ship are kind of, it's difficult to say. It's not a great substrate. The best substrate for reef building is concrete. It's almost identical to the rocks that coral naturally binds to. It's very cheap. You've seen like the 3D printed funky little shape ones that they put off the coast nowadays, and like they spring up with life almost instantly. Like you look back at them in like 6-7 months, and they're green and they have stuff on them, stuff's growing on them. You look at the Oriskity, even the Oriskity still isn't really colonized. Like there's life there, but there could be so much more. It could be so much richer if it was a bunch of concrete blocks at the bottom of the Gulf. And in hindsight, maybe we'll look at the idea of reefing ships as a really bad idea that just made sense at the time because it was cheaper to do in that context. But we've gradually learned more and understand things better now. And I don't think the United States as a reef will be a boon to the environment. I think there's, as I said, there's a lot of potential for negative impacts.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that it's not like 1975. It's not 1980. We have a better idea. The Oriskany is one of the most studied wrecks when it comes to reefing because there was so much interest in it. We now have 20 years of information about how a ship that is reefed in that environment will behave, and it's very mixed. There was a petition document that was submitted to the EPA back in 2012 that said to the U.S. Navy, you got to stop doing SINK-X, which is the practice of sinking ships as target practice. Because the Oriskany, which is like the cleanest possible example of a SINK-X type ship, was throwing up all of these environmental issues with the PCBs showing up around the ship in life, and becoming a contamination point source. We have that understanding now. And it's a lot more cut and dry to say maybe we need to pause on this. Maybe we need to consider a better alternative. And I think my appeal to the taxpayers of Okaloosa County here, which I can, maybe someone's listening, who knows, is that there are so much better ways to spend $10 million on a reefing project than buying a ship and reefing her. You could build an amazing concrete reef twice the size for that kind of cost and directly contribute to the well-being of life in the Gulf.
Right.
It would be so much cheaper, so much even safer in some ways, without having a wreck with potential entanglement hazards. If the wreck starts collapsing from galvanic corrosion, that becomes a major diving hazard. You could do so much more and bring so much more to the Gulf than just reefing the ship. And that's my appeal, I guess, in that front. It's not that I don't want Okaloosa County to have reefs. I think that the spirit is correct. It's just there are better ways of doing it, and there could be such a greater return on investment and so much less controversy and so many fewer issues by just saying a better alternative exists.
Which like you said, now that I actually know concrete is a much better substrate for reefs, I'd go 100% all in on that.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. You could imagine like acres of concrete laid out and creating this massive reef environment for divers to visit. It'd be like an underwater wonderland.
Exactly, yeah.
Again, huge. For $10 million, you could easily build a vast reef that could contain so much more life, be so much more biodiverse, and so much better for the environment. And it'd be a major diving attraction, I'm certain of it, because it's, that much life concentrated in one place. The Great Barrier Reef, that's your best comparison right there.
Yeah.
It would be phenomenal to see something like that. And I think that if that was the commitment that they wanted to go with, that would be amazing. That'd be fantastic. It's just that the United States is just not a good reef candidate, maybe not even a really good diving attraction. I've heard from divers that have talked to us and said, this really isn't going to be interesting. Because one of the things about the Oriskany and like why the Oriskany has attracted so much attention is because of the I think the technical term is a conning tower still on aircraft carriers, but the flight operations tower, it's shallow. It's only about 25 feet down, so there's different skill levels.
Right. Yeah.
One wreck. So you can be an amateur and you can dive 24 feet to the top. You can be a professional and dive to the flight deck. There's challenge to it. But with the United States, her funnel's gone, part of her superstructure gone. All of her internal space is concreted up so that way she doesn't become a diving hazard. What's the appeal? Yeah, it's big, but it's all going to be one skill level, more or less. And it's, there's not really a lot of interest in that sense. And I think that's something that's very much, the divers are speaking out against this, and the county would do well to listen to them too as part of that feedback. Again, what's a better comparison? A hulk with very little on it, or a rich multi-acre concrete garden full of coral and life and all these amazing fish and the beautiful animals that call the Gulf home? I think that'd be much more spectacular, much more interesting from a dive perspective.
Yeah. You mentioned concreting up the interiors. I hadn't heard about that. Is that like a confirmed thing that they're planning on doing?
As far as I know, that's confirmed. Just so that way divers don't go try to get lost in the engine rooms or the inside of the ship, because that's how you die, to be blunt.
Yeah. Well, then just sink concrete then.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to be concreting it up anyway. just sink the concrete. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it would be a better use of concrete, honestly.
yeah,
But
honestly, yeah,
yeah, like I said, it's something that I'd love to see. This whole thing, I want to be clear. Like maybe I'm speaking on behalf of the coalition here in the sense, but like the goal is not to take a reef away from Okaloosa County. It's not about that. It's about this particular ship that you've chosen in this particular context is a really bad choice for a lot of reasons.
yeah,
And you could do a lot more. You could benefit a lot more by saying, you know what, we don't want to ruin his, we don't want to destroy a historical artifact here. We want to create something new, and we want to create something that benefits the Gulf economy and the biosphere of the Gulf. Very respectable. Absolutely admire that. Big fan of that kind of thinking.
yeah.
But it's this particular context, in this particular way, in this particular ship that still maintains these particular protections and is an important ship in general. That's really what I think the key elements are in this, and like why this is so controversial and why this fight exists. They've reefed Liberty ships, for example, but we have other examples of Liberty ships, and
Yeah,
like Jeremiah O'Brien still does limited tours out of San Francisco, for example. So it's not like there's history being completely lost in that sense. We don't have another SS United States. We don't have another large American-made ocean liner. We just don't. Not even to say like of the period. We just don't have it. The only other passenger ship of the same time frame is probably the NS Savannah, and she has a much better shot at finding a good home versus the SS United States, which is the subject of this fight, and it's the fight we're trying to win.
right. Uh, think of a few more questions here. Well, I mean, we go into what we were talking about before the podcast started. Ocean liners. What got you into them?
Well, I mean, I grew up on the Titanic, of course, because I think every kid has a Titanic phase. I think it's a universal experience.
Yeah,
I was born in 1998 for context, so the movie had just come out the year before. I think it's why it was so big in a lot of people's minds. And I always admired Dr. Ballard. If I could ever talk to him for 5 minutes, I'd talk to him about the tube worms that he found around the undersea vents, because I think it's one of the coolest discoveries in human history.
mm,
Uh, and I kind of like shied away from it a little bit. I've always loved the ocean. I've always loved the sea. I shied away from it as time went on because, obviously you're like, oh, I want to get more serious things. Uh, I was and still am a major space buff, and that took up a lot of my mental bandwidth for a very long time. Still does. One of these days, I'd love to talk even more about that. I got stories. And, you know, I kind of fell back into it because, one, I found Mike Brady on YouTube when he was just getting started out. He was like just doing the 2D animations still, and I was like, wow, this guy's really good. It warms my heart to know that he's really is just that good of a person in real life too. That's one of the best things you can ever hear about a creator is like, oh wow, they're actually a really good person, and just as passionate, just as enthusiastic, and just as warm-hearted about things as their persona is. Great stuff. Love to see that. I started watching some more of his stuff, and when did I become aware of the SS United States? Probably around the time that I was driving through Philadelphia a whole bunch for work, to do that stuff in Baltimore. And I was like, oh, I'm going to pass an ocean liner. I want to see this. And that's when I saw her for the first time going N95, of course. So I got involved. I became a member of the Conservancy. I still have my card. And basically, hearing about the whole eviction thing and the sale it was shocking. It was like, oh, God, this is terrible. And like I said, that's how I got involved in the coalition, is because of my interest in that. But I'd say it's kind of been a recent like reinterest for me in terms of learning more about ocean liners, learning more about the Titanic, learning more about historic ships in general, and kind of rediscovering a lot of those interests that I originally had, with the newfound appreciation of a mostly developed brain to be able to like understand things better.
yeah,
Because of course, you're a kid, everything's simple, but not that I've gotten that much smarter from when I was a kid, of course, but I'd like to think I've gotten a little cleverer in some ways. So it kind of came back into that appreciation. It's kind of been a lot of my interests is revolved around the SS United States, of course, because she's endangered and because there's all this effort to trying to save this ship, this last exit before destruction kind of deal. and we well, a lot of us in the coalition kind of come from sort of a similar sort of background, like having a passing interest or having a full-fledged interest in like growing up on with this. And one of the guys even has an SS United States tattooed on his arm. I'm not that level of committed.
I
But
might be that level committed. I think I might
yeah,
be.
yeah. His artist did a really good job. But yeah, it's been great coming back into the world of ships, and it's like, wow, the ship people are not as off the handle as the space people. That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I'll say that much. I've seen some stuff. Let me tell you, I've seen some.
Oh, I'm sure.
Stuff. But so it's been great to come back and get more involved, and talk to more people, and learning there are people that care about these ships beyond just like myself. One of the nice joys that I had is that there was someone on the tour that I was on in the SS United States back in September who had also heard of Mike Brady and had heard about going on this tour through Ocean Liner Design's coverage of the SS United States. And so I told her, I was like, our friend Mike Brady. So yeah, that was a great experience too, of like bonding over that common interest, and that it spread so many different people, so many different backgrounds, so many places, so much interest across the board. It's really been an incredible diversity of people that carry an interest for these things, and it's really cool. It's really cool to kind of come back into that and see a lot more of it through older eyes.
Yeah. Mike Brady binds us together.
Yes.
He knows not the power he holds.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I kind of had a similar feeling when I finally ended up joining the Ocean Liner Designs Discord server. I'm like, oh, there's more people that kind of obsess over this like I do.
Wow.
And they're kind of chill like that. It's like, wow. And then I as I mentioned before the podcast started, the SS United States video he put out a few years back was really what kind of reignited that love for ocean liners. And then I kind of just kept watching video after video after video.
Yeah.
And then
I watched so many of his. I was like every week I was like da 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 da. That was great.
I'm off topic here. I am dying for a week that I have no guests lined up for the podcast because I'm going to tell the story of the Carpathia because that's one of my fucking favorites.
Oh, that is a phenomenal one.
Phenomenal. That,
in its own right, deserves a film made about it.
It does. Like
not even do it real.
Not even just the Titanic rescue, just in general. It just all the whole service career needs to be made into a movie. I don't even care if it's like 6-7 hours long. I'll watch the whole thing.
You could do a Carpathia rescue in real time, almost.
Yeah.
It's like a really long film. It'd be fantastic every second of the way.
It would, yeah, it'd be great. But back on topic where I was going with that. Yeah, I just kept watching video after video after video and decided to become a member on YouTube. Then I joined the Discord server, and then I found myself in the SS United States Containment Board channel more often than not. It just and then I kept looking for your updates, and then I keep scrolling through every now and then looking for updates. Then Blue Jay, he's a guy that made the Discord coalition to save the SS United States server, and he invited me to that. And that's where I frequent more now. Every now and then I'll still go through the containment board on Discord, but
yeah, I actually look at the coalition Discord basically a lot more than the containment board, because I feel like someone's gonna ping me if something really important happens and I'll know about it.
Yeah.
Like, we'll all summon Matt. And I'm like, I'm not even the most important person in the coalition, but okay.
You're not the most important person, but you're the one we know.
It's like Men in Black 2, where Jay's got the locker. Kay's got the locker full of all the little alien dudes that worship him.
Yeah.
It's like that.
You got little gremlins at your side, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, I know someone will tell me something whenever it comes up.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's just kind of once I knew I gonna do what I can for the SS United States while I can. So I've been telling everybody about it that'll lend me their ear for more than 20 minutes. and I've been putting the petition out for as much as I can, sharing it around and telling people the story. There's another podcast that my friend does, called the Dumbed and Dumdish. Was a guest on. I don't remember the episode. I think it was episode 3 as well for them. But I did a much more refined telling of that story, so I will also link that in the description to go check that one out. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm standing at today. Is basically all I can do at the moment. So yeah.
Well, I mean, every little bit of support and conversation counts. That's the thing, is the more people this reaches, the higher the odds that it reaches the right people.
Exactly. I'm spreading it to everyone that lends an ear for more than 20 minutes.
I'm guilty of talking about it. People at my day job will ask me, like, "Oh, Matt, how's the ship stuff going?" Everyone knows about it. But yeah, it's a cross that I happily bear.
Yep. I talk about it every now and then at my job, and I got to the point where the one dude was like, "Will you shut the fuck up about that ship? Holy hell." I'm like, "Sorry, I'm really passionate about it." He's like, "I get it, but damn."
Oh my god. Yeah, it's,
and then you get the people that are like, yeah, right, yep, I guess you're like talking to them about actually something you're really passionate about. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna waste your time anymore. But yeah, I mean, some of the people I've talked to about it are genuinely interested in the history, and I think I've even got someone hooked on ocean liners in general just from talking about it. So.
Oh, fantastic.
And then I sent them over to Mike Brady right away.
That's the way.
That's the way to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun talking to people about this kind of stuff, because a lot of people will get interested when you explain the context of the ship, and it's like, I didn't realize this even existed.
Exactly.
And then you get into it, and it's like, well, what? They're doing what to it? And go from there. So that's been pretty fun too. And I think it's also why it's been so important to talk about this stuff a lot, because people just haven't heard about this. It's not something that flies on people's radar very often. She sat in Philadelphia for a very long time, became part of the skyline. But if you're outside of the Philadelphia area, I don't know how many people are really that intimately familiar with the ship, besides, people like me who have read into this way too much.
Yeah. That's what on the podcast I guessed it on 2 weeks ago now. They didn't know what an ocean liner was until I explained it to them.
Oh, what is that? Some kind of cruise ship?
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of what they're like. What's the difference between a cruise ship and an ocean liner? And I gave them the rundown. And cruise ship's more like a party bus, and an ocean liner is more along the a combination of a moving truck and a limousine in some cases. That was the best way I could really put it for them. And
every bus is a party bus if you try hard enough.
True. And then they brought up the question of, why aren't more ocean liners preserved? Like, these are really cool things. Why don't people preserve them? And I'm like, well, you're not going to go and try to restore your clapped out 1999 Toyota Corolla, are you? That's just kind of the mindset some people have. They're just utilitarian things. They're going to serve their purpose, and then they're going to get scrapped or thrown at the bottom of the ocean, in this case.
Yeah.
So, it's more preserving history,
I personally think that the 1997 Toyota Camry with a dent in the rear bumper is an icon.
Oh, it is definitely an icon. I don't think you can drive down any street for more than 20 minutes and not see one.
Oh, man, that's one of my other side ventures that I've been on. As you might have guessed, I'm a man of many adventures, as I did the 24-hour of Lemons, which is where you basically have a $500 crappy car and you drive it in an endurance race or a rally. And I did a rally in New England. It broke down after one stop. It was a 1991 Geo Metro that was a manual, and the transmission just died. Fun times.
That's good stuff, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've delved a little bit into cars, not an excessive amount. I can't really just pick them out off the road and tell you all about them or anything like that.
I'm that way towards cars. Most cars except for one very specific type. Well, one Kia Soul, because I love Kia Souls. But I know, green Econobox, great car though. I drive a bright green one. My pride and joy. The 1967-1968 Mustang. It's the only car that I know like everything about.
90, oh, the 67, 68 Mustangs, they're nice. I kind of
It's some of the best looking cars ever made.
I had a thing for them at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful cars. Much like the SS United States, you can really view her rejuvenation in GBX as the world's largest project car. Uh, Preserving that bit of history, the bones are still good. You know, that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
People think about antique things. Even a 68 Mustang that hasn't been cared for very well is still pretty darn structurally sound underneath it all.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you're, driving it in the salted roads belt. But outside of that, it's kind of the same general mindset. And something kind of remarkable too to add to like things about originality and stuff like that. I'm sure you probably know this, but in terms of what is defined as a classic car, the only thing you really can't replace, like what is legally defined as the car, is the engine firewall.
Really?
Everything else you can swap out and still keep the same registration, but what is considered legally the car, as far as I remember, is basically the engine firewall between the compartment, the passenger compartment, and the engine itself. That's legally the car. Everything else is window dressing. So you can theoretically get a 67 Mustang, take all the parts off except for the firewall, put a bunch of brand new reproduction parts on there, and it'll still be considered the old car. But it solves the Ship of Theseus problem because you can't rebuild the original car out of the original parts. You still need the firewall. So
yeah, so that eat your heart out, Theseus.
I mean, and I've even heard and seen planes that have been like rebuilt from like the builder's spec plaque, which is the same principle. Like that is considered legally the plane. Everything else is replaceable. And there are some antiques out there that are so valuable that people will pour money into basically rebuilding them from like just the plate and a few other bits.
Wow,
and it's remarkable. Really is.
That's remarkable. Yeah.
A good friend of mine works for the National Museum of the United States Air Force out in Dayton, Ohio, and they do some amazing work in the restoration hangar over there. Really cool museum too if you like planes. Definitely a must go. I personally, now this might get me into trouble, but I personally would put it ahead of the Smithsonian in terms of aviation museums. Wow, it is like the best in the world, hands down. A classic example, I don't know how much of a plane guy you are, but like I was walking through and I was like, oh, they have that one. Like I turned and like, oh, it's that plane. Like everything you could think of is just there. Great museum. Speak highly of it. The New York Coalition to Save the SS United States officially endorses the National Museum of the United States Air Force.
Will you get in trouble for that one? That's the one you might need to worry about.
I didn't run that by legal. That's my opinion, and I stand by it. And God, it would be a dream to be able to build up the SS United States into like a foremost maritime history museum.
That would that would be really cool.
You know, that's something that we've talked about, even if we're not successful in saving the ship, is like building a really prestigious museum complex of all of these things you can collect together. Because there's some really great tiny museums all over the place, but nothing that's really like centralized.
Yeah.
And, as like this is the epicenter of all of this maritime history, and putting it in New York Harbor, that's the gate to the country right there.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, even if we're not successful, I'd still like to see something like that happen.
We've talked about it because we always have contingencies on this front about like what the next steps would be if we're unsuccessful, and that'd absolutely be phenomenal to have. It's just like collecting all of these little disparate pieces and bringing them all together under one roof that everybody could visit and anybody could go to. It'd be right there in New York City. I mean, having the United States as a centerpiece of that would be like the crown jewel of this beautiful little project.
Yeah,
like the epitome of American shipbuilding in the 20th century, right there.
Like, that's like boom. That is the peak right there.
Absolutely.
The piece de resistance.
I mean, who knows? Maybe someday we'll wind up building like a Queen Mary II equivalent. And having that as our ship of state. But right now it's the SS United States. It's our endangered lady.
Big ol' you.
But yeah, it's a great. I will say again, it's a great museum. I highly encourage anyone to go check it out because it's a really the best of the best, pretty much. I'd say.
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at there someday. I'm not really that into planes as I am ocean liners or anything like that, but I would like to go see. So,
as you might have guessed, I'm really into a lot.
You're into a lot of things, yes.
Yeah, it's a very useful skill when it comes to like problem solving and stuff like that, because it's like, we're talking about details on bringing the ship to GBX, and it's like, oh, well, I know XYZ solution to ABC problem. I just summoned that from my past experiences, which I guess is a pertinent lesson, is that the more varied inputs that you can get for a team in a complex project, the stronger your project will be, because being able to pull things laterally from other fields and other practices is very important to strong problem solving.
Right,
very
yeah. Important. All right. Well, we are getting to be about that time. And
yeah,
I try to keep it about an hour and a half, just because I hate editing.
Yeah, no, I apologize. You have
All
to hear
good.
my voice through all of this. I don't have to listen to my own voice now.
I'd rather hear yours than mine.
Oh, I know that feeling. That's like the hardest part. I will say the hardest part of being like a pseudo public figure and all this, like I have to listen to myself more. It's like, oh.
It's worse. It's worse marketing yourself around your voice.
Oh no! Look, if I sounded like you, I'd never shut up. That's the thing.
You would if you heard it every day.
But yeah, it's it's been a real joy to be on here and talk a lot about it. We covered a lot of ground and a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
The big lesson I guess to take away from this and to summarize a lot of this is, we haven't given up the fight. We're not giving up the fight till the very end. We're coming out with this amended complaint. We'll see what Okaloosa says or does. We're still trying to get the attention of the White House to get them to realize they have the power to solve all of this in the stroke of a pen. And, we think that the administration that's currently in place would be very favorable towards something like this. It's a grandiose project. And to bundle it all together in a nice little neat bow, last Saturday, as I briefly touched upon, was the semi-quincentennial of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which kicked off the American Revolution. In a year, we're going to be talking about the 250 of the 4th of July. Really big day.
Yeah.
A really big time period from now until the anniversary of the Battle of Yorktown, which will be, man, it's going to be like 6-7 years from now. Very important time for all this. And I can't think of a better 250th birthday present for this country than getting the ship of state back to her original splendor and glory and bringing her home to New York City where she belongs. I think there is no greater present. There is no greater way to tie all this up. And I would love to see her as an example for the next 100, 200 years even. I mean, you see how long the U.S.'s Constitution's been afloat.
Exactly.
Who knows? It would be amazing. And it'd be amazing to have one of the great queens of the Atlantic on our coast to be the other half of the bookend with the Queen Mary.
Got the queen on the West Coast, first lady on the East.
It would be amazing. It would be absolutely fantastic. And I think that's, part of the reason why we won't give up the fight. Everything else that I've said too, but that's the big thing to really think about is 250 semi-quincentennial. It's right now. It's going on right now. I'm going to be physically at the Battle of Bunker Hill in June. So if anyone listening is a Rev War reenactor or interested in history, come out, go see the 43rd afoot and say hi to me. I'll be there. And I really, what an important time for such an important ship. We're fighting the clock every day, but we're fighting hard. We've not given up, and we're not going to give up.
Hell yeah.
Brooklyn or bust.
Brooklyn or bust.
Yeah.
Well, I guess closing statements here. To our viewers here. You can thank Matt for this podcast really even existing. Because I had not even planned on making a podcast until I mentioned in the Ocean Liner Designs Discord, hey, I'd like to tell stories. Do you think people would watch that on stream? And he'd be like, I'll guest with you sometime. And then I had like a full-on week-long, do I make a podcast? How do I do this? Do I really want to sit and edit? Fuck it, we're making a podcast.
Yeah, here we are.
Matt,
here we are.
21st, let's go.
Yeah, you messaged me. You were like, "You free April 21st?" Like, of course I am. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. But yeah, it's been such a joy to come on talk about this stuff. You're a gracious host, and I'm honored to be here as an esteemed guest so early on. And I sure as hell hope I can come back soon.
I will definitely have you back on because.
And I'll tell you this much. I know you're not far away. We get the ship. I want you to do an episode on the ship.
Oh, absolutely! I would love to do that.
That is my formal invitation on behalf of the coalition. Come on board and do a show.
I do not even care if there's no restorations or anything. I will come onto the bare metal. I will set up a laptop and I will do a podcast episode.
Laptop, 2 folding chairs, and 2 mics.
We'll do it.
Set.
We're doing it live.
And I'll be on camera for that one, I swear. I'll have my better camera, not my 3-pixel one.
Well, that'll be amazing. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you can take that one to the bank.
Take that one, yeah. All right, well, I'll leave you off here then, Matt. I'll let you go to bed since it's past your bedtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I totally wasn't extremely nervous right like 20 minutes before I hit call button.
Oh, I hope you feel a little better about that now. Like
I'm
just
a
guy.
You're just a guy, the way we look at you in the Discord and the way I see you now is
me as your god. No, I'm just
all
a guy.
hail Matt. He is our coalition man.
He's the guy from the coalition. Like I said, I'm not even the most important person in the coalition.
You're the one we know.
But the one you guys know. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a joy to come on and talk, and it's an honor to be here. And I hope that everyone out there has a fantastic evening.
You as well, Matt. Thank you for coming on.
Have a good one.
You as well.